time though. Yeah, let's see what else he has to say.
Because one of the old metaphysical problems is, why would God allow evil into the world? I think, well, maybe God didn't allow evil into the world. Maybe God allowed the possibility of evil into the world. That's different. And maybe the world with the possibility of evil is actually a better world than the world without the possibility of evil. It's something like that, in that maybe a man is better when he's a dangerous man who's being good than he would be if he was just a good man who wasn't capable of being dangerous. And I believe that, because the best men that I've ever met are very dangerous men. You don't mess with them.
Yeah.
So, and you know that as soon as you meet them.
Do you think weak men can be virtuous?
No.
Because I think that when you're weak, let's say that signals that you don't have the options to sin.
Right.
Which is something that creates resentment, and resentment creates corruption.
Mm-hmm.
So in this sequence, do you think that someone without teeth or without the options to sin can be
good? See, that's a real theological question, right? Because the question you're asking is, and this is tied up with the idea of free will and evil. Can a person who doesn't have the option to be evil be good? And I would say no. So maybe that's the reason that, metaphysically speaking, and I don't know where you are when you're speaking metaphysically exactly, but the question of why is there evil in the world is a constant question. It's like, it's possible that without the possibility of evil, there cannot be good. Good requires the possibility of evil.
So when it comes to the topic at hand regarding the beta mindset, when you suppress yourself, your authentic self, in favor of being agreeable and going along to get along and fitting in, all traits that we've seen displayed over the last few years in one form or another, because people were afraid of being labeled something or being in the out group or killing grandma. Those things are what, when you're when you're only going on the one, you only want to play on, I'm just going to go along. I'll be a good person. I'll do whatever everyone else says is good. Because, we're all saying it's good. So let's just do, I don't want to rock the boat. That mindset that lends itself to, like Jordan was saying earlier, being obedient to a fault, to where you're just going to obey off a cliff. They say it's for your benefit, for everyone else's benefit. And this mindset of not allowing yourself to say, like, to disobey, or even in your own social circle, whether it's with your family or with your friends, to say, hey, I don't think this makes a lot of sense what they're telling us about this, like what we should be doing. Because that was really, man, it's not as bad as it was now, because we got other things to distract people, but disagreeing on that was tense. It still is, but to a point that, like, even you, like, oh, hey, I don't wear a mask. This sort of, oh my God, like, really? Like, that's just my choice still, but you can't choose that. Why? Because you didn't allow yourself that. And, like, yeah, that's for most people. There was never a choice, because they can only be good, whatever that means in the moment. When that allows a lot, like, what's the saying? The road to hell is paved with what? Good intentions. So nice people,
right?
They always have good intentions in their actions, but when you suppress yourself, when you don't allow yourself the ability to disobey because you perceive obedience as a virtue, you're going to end up obeying to a fault, to where you're like, oh, like Jordan's, one thing leads to another, and before you know it, you're obeying with things that you never thought you would, and then you're also pissed at the people who aren't.
Yeah. I think Robert brings up the good thing out here, because we are talking about conflict and adversity. He says without adversity there is no choice, which is very true. You have to choose how you act in the face of adversity. And what Jordan was saying here with virtues, how good men can't, or what did he say?
Weak men can't be virtuous, I think.
Right. Yeah. Because they don't have any moral principle to stand upon, to make a choice behind. Right.
They're not allowed. Well, yeah, they're not allowing themselves to sin. So therefore they're, being, if their only choice is always to be good, then that choice
It's
is
not a choice.
It's
Yeah.
not a choice, right? So it's not, you're not actually being good because you didn't ever allowed yourself to connect with the part, the classic image of the angel and the devil, when the nice people are, oh, I'm only going to listen to the angel. And what if that angel happened to do experiments on dogs back in the day, but
Yeah.
hey, he's the good guy. Yeah, come on,
Yeah.
listen to me. There's only one. Like, the reason that dynamic is like, you got the one guy on the left hand and one guy on the right hand, is because if you're only listening to one side, there's nothing to balance it out, and inevitably the scales become tipped to where, oh, I'm doing a good thing by, what are you doing by locking somebody else up and throwing away the key? What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and I'd also argue that having virtue or having principles, requires adversity to put those principles to the test. Because if you say you're a principled person and you stand for equality and you stand for certain movements that happen,
they got the
and
sign. They're standing.
But if you're not put into moments of adversity, you can't evaluate those principles that you're standing on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And
when push comes to shove, aren't those the times when principles matter the most? Because again, it's a classic example, but everyone thinks they'd be the guy that wouldn't, Heil Hitler. But it's obvious it's not the case. The vast majority of people would. The vast majority of people go all the way with the Milgram experiment, and they shock the guy till he dies.
Yes,
like,
and I think that's why. I think that's why we're seeing like these people create these false narratives of white supremacy, racism, misogyny. They're creating, it's almost like a fake adversity or fake conflict for them, because the majority of the people that disagree with them they're none of those things, and they actually have actual, authentic, genuine conflict for the person holding those viewpoints that person is avoiding like the plague. Because I think in the end, if they had to confront that, it would maybe make them change their principles a little bit. And one of those principles possibly being like, I stand for whatever the current thing is. Like whatever the current social mass, whatever the current flow that the mass is in. That's what I support, because we're a collective society, and collectivism is better than the individual. Well, if that's a principle you stand on, I mean, you got to bring that to the table.
Facebook should have an opt-in option for people to just opt into the NBC programming line. So like,
and it just changes your profile picture.
It automatically changes your profile.
It has a bot to update your statuses.
No, it'll hashtag like, don't you can just upload, like, just have your pictures constantly uploaded, and like we'll pick out like a good photo that's relevant for that. Like, don't worry, man, you don't even have to be on social media. Everyone else will just be seeing it, and it'll just be everyone's become a bot. Well, that's where it's at. Where you go on Reddit, you can't tell the bot from the NPC. They're all the same thing. It's the same thing. That's the scary part. That's the Socrates unexamined life. Like, it's. I was saying this to a friend earlier. I'm like, I don't understand. I can't relate to these people at all who just switch between these temporary profile pics. It's just. It's so far from what I was thinking.
Mindless is what it is. It's just so automatic.
100%.